Apple versus Wacom, or more specifically in this case, an iPad Pro with an Apple Pencil versus a high-end Wacom Cintiq drawing display like the one you can see there. I'm not a tech reviewer, but I have been using stuff to draw digitally on screens for a long time, over 20 years. I've got, two Wacom Cintiqs in this room. There's one there, there's one in front of me. I've got a Wacom just tablet, the normal sort of stylus and tablet on the workstation behind me. I bought the first iPad Pro you could get as soon as it came out. I bought the first Apple Pencil you could get as soon as it came out. I've got, an updated, iPad Pro, Apple Pencil 2. I play around with these things a lot. If they're useful, I use them, and I also talk to hundreds of students each year who make these types of purchasing decisions, and I hear all the trials and tribulations that they go through, when they sort of purchase different things. So I've got a pretty good idea about, what's good about these different things and how they can sort of fit into your digital art life. I think this is actually an interesting subject that's worth discussing. Now, you might be thinking, hey, is it worth adding an iPad Pro to my drawing arsenal? Is this actually going to be fun and, make life better in some way? Or more specifically, I think a lot of people are just starting out their artistic journey in the digital art realm. And the question there is like, is this enough? Can you just go solo iPad, or, is the idea of, having a Cintiq with a workstation and Photoshop, is that significantly better? That's what I want to talk about in this video, and hopefully give you a bit of an insight on, the pluses and minuses of these two systems, and again, how they might help you and fit into your life. Let's get started. Just quickly, my name's Tim McBurney. I've been a professional working artist for 20 years and a professional drawing teacher for quite some time. And my main goal here with this channel on YouTube is to help you draw cool stuff from your imagination, to embrace the challenge of drawing, and to master the craft of line and color illustration, which again is what I do. I normally draw line and color illustrations, and I've been using digital tools to do that for basically my entire working life. And again, they've gotten better. They've gotten a lot better. And my opinion, again, spoiler alert, is that the Wacom systems, especially the higher end Cintiqs, are technically, objectively, a lot better than an iPad and an Apple system. To me, I'm just like, that is a fact. And, a long time ago, I sort of thought that I would make a video like this, and I'd really, go hard on the fact that the Apple system just isn't that good. It's not as accurate. It's a small screen, blah, 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 blah. The point is that I've seen a lot of people do really cool stuff with the iPad Pros and, using Procreate versus Photoshop. And, for me, I use, a workstation with multiple monitors. I like it to be big. And, I really believe that that's kind of what I want. But I've just seen people, very, very, very experienced artists who I look up to, both people who, started traditionally and have sort of started to use digital stuff, and also, people who are, can use Photoshop and have used Photoshop professionally, using, simple Procreate and, an iPad Pro to create high-end professional work. And I just look at that and I'm like, okay, it works for them. And I think this really highlights the most important takeaway from this video that I want to give you, which is you will adapt to the tools. You will adapt to the tools that you're given. And if you have the skill and you have that focus, you'll be able to get a lot out of them. It doesn't really matter, okay? The tools don't really matter that much. As long as they get to a certain point, which again, I think the Apple sort of system does, it obviously gets to that point because people can create really good stuff with it. And the proof is in the pudding. And it's the same thing with Procreate versus Photoshop, or, the different digital art programs, right? People can get really good results with, a lot of wide variety of stuff. So don't worry too much about, is one drastically better than the other? I think now, the modern sort of iPad Pro, is a very good drawing system. I see a lot of people using it professionally, and it seems like they're using it exclusively professionally. Like that's just what they're doing all their work with. People drawing comics, people doing concept art, people doing illustration. A lot of the limitations that I would imagine people would have with a screen this big and the tools and the accuracy of the pencil, which is it's good. It's not as good as a Wacom, but people adapt and they just create cool stuff with it, and you can too. So don't worry too much about that. That's the first most important step here. Don't worry, you will adapt to the tools, and the both of them are able to achieve really, really high-end professional results. End of story. Okay, so if you're just sort of wondering, like, well, what do I mean by the Wacom system being technically better? I think just objectively, the pressure sensitivity in the pen system is better. It seems like it has more resolution, and even though this is not really a technical analysis, the size of the nib on a Wacom stylus is just a lot smaller. And if you really think about the fineness of the line and how sort of accurate you can be and how small you can make the line, the Wacom system, in my experience, just feels a lot better in that regard. The Apple system operates slightly differently, and I think that's very indicative of the way Apple tends to approach things. When you're using it, if you just kind of use it a fair bit and you just, again, adapt to it, you don't notice any of that. It's very good at kind of not getting in the way. It's not as accurate, but if you adapt to it, you can kind of do whatever you need to do. Other things that are worth considering are just the technical sort of physical limitations of both. So the screen on the iPad is still like a little bit slippery compared to the Wacom screens. I think that, again, just that sort of interaction of pen on screen is better with the Wacom. And you can see that by the variety of things that people tend to buy to put on the screen or adjust the pen to make the Wacom system feel a little bit better. It's got a rubber tip, but it still feels a little bit clumsy in my experience, and a little bit more like an older Wacom where you're sort of skating on ice a little bit, right? You don't have that friction, which again I think can be really useful. Now, there's not a lot more to say in terms of the technical stuff, because that's really all that matters. How does the pen feel? Is it accurate? Is it not accurate? Another really obvious thing that's worth considering is that you can use the Wacom for anything. So whereas if you're thinking about doing two-dimensional illustration or two-dimensional work, the iPad Pro actually can be all you need. I think it's very, very capable of creating professional level two-dimensional illustrations, and you don't really need anything more than just sending someone a finished JPEG or some other really two-dimensional file. Whereas, if you're wanting to work in the entertainment industry, maybe you do want to do some 3D or have some options there, be able to use different programs. Again, a Wacom Cintiq will allow you to use ZBrush or Blender or anything else. And again, you have a lot more flexibility, and I think the investment will be, worth a lot more in that case. If you look at the quality of the monitors, again, it really depends how much you spend with a Wacom product. If you spend a lot of money and get the Pro line, you do get a really high-end, nice monitor and display. It displays a wide range of color gamut, and again, it's very, very much a professional level monitor. If you buy the lower-end Cintiqs, again, I have in front of me a Wacom Cintiq 16, and that doesn't have a really high-end display. It works quite well for just sort of drawing and those sorts of things, but compared to the iPad, again, the iPad also has a really, really high-end display, and it's something where you can just sort of go and buy one and it's going to be really good. Whereas with the Wacom Cintiq, again, like you kind of have to think about which one are you buying, does that actually have a good screen, is that what you need, etc., etc. One of the best things about Apple gear is that most of the screens they have are really, really good color managed and really good in terms of just their ability to display a wide color gamut. If you look at the iPad, I think things that we can say are good about them now and are probably going to be good about them going forward is that they're fast. If you are using Procreate or another digital art program there, your actual experience is good, and that's similar to the screen. If you just kind of go buy one, there's very, very high confidence that it's going to give you a good working experience. Whereas if you buy a Wacom Cintiq, you've got to plug it into something. And again, if you don't spend good money there as well, it doesn't matter how good the screen is. You just, your actual, action of, using programs and just moving stuff around is, going to be limited if your computer's slow. Whereas, these, Apple products, especially now that everything's moving to the M1 sort of architecture, things are just going to get faster. It is really good, and there's something really, really important about having, response when you are actually sort of drawing. Now, if you are looking at starting out in digital art, you might want to check out my free quick start guide. It does go over how to create the type of line and color illustrations that I create in Photoshop, not on an iPad, not in a Procreate, but I should probably add that at some point because, again, it's very, very simple. There's not really much difference between any digital art program and a simple line and color style. It's very accessible. But if you want to know how I do what I do in Photoshop, go check out that quick start guide. It shows you how I do everything, and it gives you all the brushes and Photoshop documents that you need to get up and started quickly. Now, the iPad's meant to be portable, and it is portable, but it's important to consider what lighting situation you use it under. This is something that, again, I think can just completely ruin your day if you're imagining it's going to work in a particular way. An iPad just doesn't work very well under bright sunlight. So if you are in the place in the world where the light's very bright and you're trying to take it outside and draw, often it just sort of doesnn't work, right? It's a non-starter. It just kind of, there's weird reflections on the screen. You can't really see what you're doing. But it does work when there's low light. And I think that is a really, really, really valuable part of it. If maybe you're just thinking, hey, is it worth adding one of these to my toolkit? Maybe you already have a Wacom Cintiq, you already have a desktop. Are these good? Yeah, they're really good, especially if you're trying to sketch around and get some extra drawing in, but the lighting situation in your house, or where you are in the world, or whether you're outside and it's sort of getting dark, this is magical. You can draw on it in the dark. That's so cool. And again, I think that's probably the best use case if you're thinking like, do I need this? Well, this is something that nothing else can do. You can't portably take something you can draw on into a bad lighting situation and just know that it's going to perform, and you can also do color on it and all that sort of stuff as well, which is really cool. So again, it's not about what's better, it's about what's better for you. And again, that's something you really want to do. If you can work that into your life and get more drawing done, then that's a huge, huge benefit, and something that, the iPad gives you that can't be done otherwise. But as I said, it doesn't work very well in the sun, and it's really, really important to understand. Again, if you're thinking you're going to want to use it for portability reasons and you take it outside, it's a total non-starter. You're much better off just buying a really good sketchbook and using your sketchbook and a pencil if you're normally sketching outside or you've got good light in your house. Now, what's wrong with the iPad? Well, I use it every day, but not for drawing. I use it just as a normal iPad, and I think it's really, really good as a normal iPad. It's powerful, it's fast, it's got a great screen, it's big. I like the bigger Pro version. But yeah, I just don't really use it because for me, I've got other things to draw on, and it's just not that sort of enticing. I feel like the screen is just too small, and when people do tend to use it as a main professional workstation or something where they're doing a lot of work on, they tend to modify it. They tend to, again, have to modify the pencil. They tend to, want to put some sort of screen protector on to give it sort of more friction and more traction. And also a really, really important thing to just get your head around is that, if you're sort of drawing on, something like this, it's kind of fiddly, you don't have somewhere to rest your hand. So what you tend to find is if you're actually going to do a lot of work on it, you're probably either going to buy one of those things that people buy that sort of, it slots, the iPad slots into, and it gives you that sort of room so that you can actually kind of have a continuous surface and not kind of, hit the edge, or, you can basically rest your palm on it. And again, that's really important. You can see that on the Wacom Cintiqs. They've got this big chunky bezel around the edge, and you think, well, that's kind of lo-fi. That's sort of like, last generation technology, but it's important because that's a really smooth, clean surface, and you can, rest your arm off the side and still draw, on the actual screen active part. And again, that's something that you sort of don't get with the iPad. So you tend to find it sort of that if you do want to sort of draw seriously on it, in my case, I need to sort of put it on a desk and, actually kind of, rest my arm, and sort of get to a point where I can sort of actually use it how I would normally use a bit of paper. It's good to sort of sketch around a little bit, you're sitting on the couch, kind of doing all that sort of stuff. That's fun for a while, but, if you're doing that for, 8 hours a day, it kind of starts to suck, right? You want that sort of freedom. You want to be able to draw with your whole body and get that sort of working. And, I find this just doesn't do a great job of that. And, I just don't sort of need to. So again, I feel like the screen is just a little bit small. That's a major sort of, negative point for me. And again, I've got other stuff, and this just isn't enticing enough to make me sort of use it in any meaningful way. And that really is where I think the rubber meets the road with these. If you're using it as either a secondary computer or something that you kind of access when you need, I think it works really well. I think it can be really useful. In a similar way, if you're just starting out digital art and you don't want the complications that come with a full workstation and all that kind of fussy stuff where you're using a lot of keyboard shortcuts and you're optimizing everything, using multiple screens, then this kind of is all you need, and it works really well for that. Once you start to move away from that and sort of try and use it as a proper, fully fledged workstation, to me it kind of just loses its luster. It loses the elegance and the simplicity that sort of Apple has there. Again, maybe that will change if you can sort of in the future, add displays to it or do these things easier. Again, that stuff is getting better. But again, what it sort of tends to look like is that you get sort of a really bad workstation that you kind of have to sort of put down on a desk anyway and link up to other monitors and keyboards and mice anyway. And in that case, again, I'm just like, what's the point? Just get a proper computer and do it that way instead. Ultimately, I think, again, there's probably, as I said, two real use cases here that are important to consider. One is if you are already doing okay in your digital art career, you've got a bunch of stuff and you're just sort of saying like, is this worth spending, a chunk of money on? Again, in my opinion, yeah, sure. It's got a great screen. You can use it to view images anywhere. I really think it's, often really useful is I actually take it with me sketching and just use it to look at reference images with, or, some sort of brief I'm working with. It's a portable computer that makes you in general more portable overall. And the display is good. I can't say enough about how good the screen is and the retina aspect of it. The fact that you can kind of, again, look at an image and you're seeing a really high-res, full sort of display version of it. It's also really, really good for reading comic books on. I've got a huge number of digital comics on this thing, and it's just amazing. To me, it convinces me that the future of comic books and other sort of visual magazines and stuff like that is going to be digital. It is going to be on an iPad. Once people take advantage of those colors, it's going to be amazing, right? It is just a really, really good tool to have. It's got hundreds of other things you can do with it. Maybe just not the drawing. The drawing's okay. But I think if, as a professional artist, adding one and getting a big one and, making sure it's fast, super useful. I 100% recommend it. If, on the other hand, you're thinking, hey, I'm just starting out with digital art. I know there's a lot of people, especially sort of in high school, you don't have much money and you're thinking like, look, I want to try and draw stuff and I want to do it digitally. You might also be someone who's recommending this to someone else. Like, look, can you actually do enough with, an iPad? Yeah, I think you can. I think this is something that where we have turned the corner there. And I know people, in my life who are doing that. They're into art, and I know lots of sort of students have, come into, the schools that I teach in, and they're just used to using iPads and Clip Studio or Procreate or whatever it is on the iPad. And you can actually do a lot of stuff there. More importantly, I've seen a lot of high-end professional artists using these things exclusively to just do all their work. And there's the proof. You can basically get as far as you want in the two-dimensional game with an iPad. And again, the limitations are more going to be like, how convenient is it? How ergonomic is it? For me, again, having the keyboard shortcuts, multiple monitors, like large monitors, and being able to play around with customizing is why I have a desktop and a workstation. But if you're just starting out, I think that the iPad system and that idea is probably the way to go, because it's the thing where you can just buy it and know that it's going to work. And I know that a lot of people starting digital art, for you that might be a real challenge, because if I just tried to explain to you all the things that you need to think of when you're buying a computer, we'd be here for hours. There's so many things that are important, are going to influence your pleasure and the enjoyable nature that you're going to have when you're actually creating art. They are, again, how good is the screen? How fast is it? There's so many pitfalls when it comes to buying either, just a standard Wacom, like a drawing tablet with a stylus, and a laptop or a machine or a Cintiq or whatever. If you just buy an iPad Pro, it will work, and you can basically use it for as long as you want to get really, really good. That's all you need to know. And I think that's the number one reason why I think it is taking over, and people really do enjoy using it. And I think that's why, if you're in that situation, I can fully recommend, just grab one of these, grab Procreate. You can't go wrong. It's a really, really good solution in that case, and I can almost guarantee that you have a good experience with it, and it'll get you pretty much as far as you want. You can certainly start your career on one of these things and go very, very far. Don't worry about that. And as I said, we will adapt to any of the tools we use, so it doesn't really matter. These things are great, and you can use it for as long as you want, basically. And look, that's coming from a total Photoshop snob. I've been using Photoshop for forever, my entire career, and I think it's a lot better, it's a lot more flexible, it's a lot more high-end. I much prefer having multiple giant high-quality screens in front of me. I want all that stuff. I want keyboard shortcuts. But the reality is that that's just my reality. That's just what I think. And the proof is that this is a really, really good option, because, as I said, you can just go buy one and get started. And Procreate's cheap. It's a very cheap application. All of the applications on here are really cheap and accessible. There's tons of tutorials on how to use it. Everyone's using it. I think to a certain degree, a lot of the big sort of influencers and people who are like creating good art on Procreate are using it somewhat because they know that they're going to get more followers and people who are wanting to take their tutorials and stuff, because everyone wants to know how to use Procreate. No one wants to know how to use Photoshop. This is what people are using these days. So, I think it's a really, really accessible thing. You can just go out and buy and use. And in my opinion, that's the most important thing. The thing that you can just pick up and use and go with and dig into and learn how to use. That's the most important thing. So, if you're not 100% up on computer stuff, just go get the iPad, use Procreate, get stuck in and start creating awesome stuff. That's all that matters in the end. That's all I got. Catch you around. Happy drawing.